Hey everyone, it is National EDAwareness Week, and we are covering different myths about eating disorders on TogetherweR this week. In the UK, Beat's theme for this year's EDAwareness Week was Break the Silence, and I think that's such an excellent message. There's so much stigma about eating disorders, and eating disorders themselves induce a lot of feelings of shame and cause us to isolate. So breaking the silence is a huge step in healing. So I'm really loving that motto that they're using, and I'm merging the two because the internet has no geography. So these things are universal with eating disorders, no matter where you live. So, breaking the silence, great message. And then here, NEDA, the NEDAwareness Week motto is everybody knows somebody, and that's also so true. And it goes hand in hand with the whole break the silence thing. Their EDs are so common. You may know somebody who has one and not even know. Especially in cases where somebody isn't emaciated, which seems to be a public assumption that the only people sick with eating disorders are those who are drastically emaciated. But some of the other girls have talked about weight. The two myths that I'm addressing are eating disorders are a choice, not an illness, and that refeeding or weight restoration is a cure. These are both false. So on both of these subjects, I have some previous videos in which I address these issues pretty in depth. So what I'm going to do is insert material from them in this video to help explain why these things are not true. There is a huge misconception that eating disorders are cured once a patient is weight restored. This is not true. This is a very big myth. Many treatment centers employ refeeding as either their primary or a very significant portion of recovery treatment. However, we know from research that individuals who continue in intensive outpatient therapy or even outpatient therapy on an ongoing basis take much longer to overcome their disorder than is required to reach a normal weight. In fact, individuals who can be at a normal weight and still suffer all of the mental sequelae that result from suffering from an eating disorder. You've got the outsiders who aren't educated, who think that we choose to starve for some vain ideal, like we want to look like somebody or be more well liked, and it's all about weight and vanity, and it's just ridiculous. EDs are not a choice. In fact, there are many of us who have latent tendencies and then end up developing an eating disorder before even knowing what these behaviors were called or what disease they were indicative of. That was definitely true for me. I didn't know what I was doing or what an ED was when things began for me. So don't assume that everybody who has an eating disorder was just like, hey, I think I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to start cultivating a relationship with a fatal illness. I mean, it's just absolute ridiculousness. Even if you wanted to, I don't believe that you could. I think that predisposition has to be within. There are 3 different components of eating disorder development, in this case anorexia. Let's see here. Physiological,
that's like genetics. We do know that a family history of eating disorders makes the manifestation more likely. Also, new research published online in the International Journal of Eating Disorders explains why this happens. For the study, scientists administered a one-time dose of the drug amphetamine, which is a stimulant. It causes the release of dopamine in the brain. Positron emission tomography, PET, which is a type of scan, was then used to visualize the subsequent dopamine activity. So they get like a chart where they can actually measure peaks and troughs, different levels and responses. In helping subjects without an eating disorder, the amphetamine-induced release of dopamine was associated with feelings of extreme pleasure in the brain's reward center. There are different areas of the brain, and in different kinds of brain scans, different neuronal activity, like say you're recalling something, your memory center would light up on certain scans. So that's what they're talking about evaluating. When they administered the amphetamine, these are the areas of the brain that were stimulated and could be seen. The non-eating disorder population given the amphetamine felt pleasure in the brain's reward center. However, the people with anorexia, amphetamine made them feel anxious and activated the part of the brain that worries about consequences. So here's like an actual physiological response or etiology that is not dismissed by just some kind of behavioral influence. Okay, so let's see, Walter K., MD, Professor of Psychiatry and Director of the Eating Disorder Treatment and Research Program at the University of California, San Diego School of Medicine, was the head researcher, and he said, "This is the first study to demonstrate a biological reason why individuals with anorexia nervosa have a paradoxical response to food." The third issue, actually second issue is psychological. Personality type, low self-esteem. Anorexia nervosa is associated with certain personality traits such as perfectionism, obsessiveness, and withdrawal, as well as other psychological disorders such as anxiety, depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Focusing on food and weight provides a diversion from underlying psychological problems that may be too difficult to address or control. In other words, it's a coping mechanism. It's toxic and aberrant and dangerous, but it is a mode of survival when one cannot cope any other way. Okay, so the third is behavioral, a history of trauma or loss, negative or toxic family influences, and yes, media and social influence. It is a component, it is a potential trigger, but it is not the whole story. Best descriptor I've ever encountered for describing how anorexia and related EDs develop is the loaded gun triad. It's an analogy that says genetics are the gun, personality traits are the bullets, and some environmental trigger, a trauma, a loss, a negative family dynamic, fire that gun. So there's a lot of complexity to the development of eating disorders, and it is not as simple as wanting to be thin or pretty. These are genuine diseases. So yeah, eating disorders are very serious mental illnesses. In fact, anorexia nervosa is the most fatal of any mental illness. 20% of us will die from this disorder, despite treatment interventions and desire to recover. So that's important to acknowledge. Also, recovery is not as simple as picking up the fork. In fact, even when anorexics were weight restored and outwardly, physically normal, at a normal weight, the mental aspects of the disorder remain for life, and many physical consequences will remain for life.
Thanks so much for joining me this week. I hope all of you are having a happy ED Awareness Week and are doing something to raise awareness. Maybe it's time to tell somebody. Maybe it's time to put together an awareness project for your school or family or friends. Take advantage. There's so many of us suffering. An estimated 28 million Americans have eating disorders. This is no small issue in any way. So enjoy your week, and if you haven't pursued any path to healing, know that it is possible. Much love and be well, precious ones. Bye, guys.